Hello, today we're talking about the passive, Unit 6 from Advanced Language Practice. And I'm going to tell you a couple of things that I'm sure you already know, right? That in the passive voice, you have an active sentence like beavers build dams, right? Where beavers, like this, beavers build dams. You have a subject in the active and an object in the active, and once you turn this into the passive voice, you get dams are built by beavers, right? And now the subject becomes the passive agent and the object becomes the passive subject, right? But what has happened here, mainly what we have done is to change the focus, right? By giving more relevance to, in this case, the agent, which has been mentioned, as you know, sometimes it may be omitted. Now, it should be said that the use of by is one of the tests of the passive, right? To decide if a verb is in the passive, maybe checking if we can add a by phrase is a good test, right? Now, why do we use the passive? Well, for several reasons. This is something that is going to be discussed in this unit, but basically to change the focus, and because sometimes we are forced because of grammatical circumstances, right? In this case, I'm going to take you not to page 30, but to page 31 of your notes, right? Where you have the reasons why we use the passive, right? The first one being changing the focus, and as I was saying earlier, giving more prominence to the by phrase, right? Or it may be, as the following points note, that you don't know the agent, or it is too general, or it is too obvious, or it is unimportant, or it is impersonal. The sentence is impersonal. So the reasons are many, and there are also reasons that are not mentioned here why you may actually want to use the passive, and not because of the agent, but because maybe you have a by phrase which is very, very long, right? Something like the operation was performed by the great Sir John Smith, the very well-known surgeon, blah, 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 blah. It may be because it is more interesting, right? As in the case you had here, that the prize was won by Jack. It is more interesting, right? The agent may be inanimate, right? Usually when it is inanimate, I was woken by the noise. He was hidden by a tree. These inanimate objects tend to occur in the passive voice, right? And sometimes, because simply we want to clarify and draw attention to the reason, casualties caused by careless driving, right? Sometimes it's because the agent is too long. Helen was surprised by all the messages of sympathy she received after the problem she had, right? And also, when you want to avoid a personal subject, instead of saying you must, we usually say in English, all applicants must do something, right? So that's quite interesting. Also, another interesting point, which is not mentioned in the notes, is the question of certain verbs in the passive, right? Verbs like say, think, feel, expect, believe, that allow you to make certain changes to sentences, like they believe he is the thief, right? Or he is believed to be the thief, or it is believed that he is the thief, right? So these verbs are quite effective in giving you several options, right? I also would like to talk about some verbs. I insist these are not in your notes, that are sometimes misused. You know the verb to steal? The verb to steal means you take something that doesn't belong with you, so you steal a case, as it says here on the right, but you steal a wallet. You steal, basically, we say, what you take with you, but you rob a place, right? You rob a bank, you rob a house, because you take the contents with you. Now, You may say, I was robbed of my wallet. So you may say either my wallet was stolen or I was robbed of my wallet, right? Another peculiar verb is the verb make, right? Make in the passive voice, will change its pattern, right? You make someone do something, right? But, oops. I was made to go, right? And this also was made to go. Sorry, I wrote to go, right? And also he was heard to leave. That's odd, isn't it? You hear someone do something and you make someone do something. But I was made to go and he was heard to leave, right? The one about here is less frequent, to be frank, but that's interesting anyway, right? And remember the pair let and allow. Yes, I let you do something, I let you do something, but he was allowed to do something, right? So you cannot use let in the passive voice, right? In the same way, you don't use steal in the passive voice, right? Okay, now we're going to go back to the beginning of the notes, and one of the things that so I'm going back to page 30, though I'm not going to use all the materials there, to be frank. I insist I will let you go over those sentences on your own. Another thing we need to learn about the passive voice, which is very important, is that it doesn't change the truth value of the sentence, right? The truth value, right? Or the propositional meaning, right? What do I mean by that? That when you use the passive voice, you're not changing the meaning of anything, right? You're just changing the order of the constituents. Yes, true, you are changing the emphasis, right? You're giving more prominence, the word is prominence, maybe to the by phrase, but that doesn't mean you change the meaning or the content of the meaning of the sentence, right? Also, you know that we use the passive voice more frequently in scientific articles, in news reporting, in expository prose, right? This is more frequent in those cases, right? And also there are certain verbs that tend to occur a lot in the passive voice, like I was born. Also, he is reputed to be exceedingly rich, right? And I can't be bothered to stand up, meaning I don't want to, right? Oh, this white paper thing, you have here the definition for the white paper, which is something I was doing earlier, right? Just disregard it, sorry. Okay, and one more thing about the passive voice is that sometimes you get other prepositions, instead of by. Yes, you may be surprised at someone's behavior. You may be hit with a hammer. You may be disenchanted with someone. You may be concerned about something. You may be disappointed in someone, right? And these tend to refer to sort of passive constructions, right? Because you disappoint me, something concerns me, something disenchants me, right? Okay, one other point before we go to what I think is really the most interesting aspect about the passive, because I don't think anything I'm telling you is something you don't know, right? So one more point is that sometimes we can have a double passive, right? As in weapons were allowed to be slipped to Iran, right? So we have two passives, were allowed, yes, and be slipped. That's just what you can do in language, right? Or after he had been sentenced to be beheaded, right? He cried, right? A bit dramatic. Okay, so last but not least, let's get to the point that I think is the most interesting one about the passive, and that is whether we know or we can tell whether a combination of the verb to be, mostly in the past, though not necessarily plus a past participle, is a passive voice, right? So when I gave you the first example, dams are built by beavers, you had no problem understanding that that was a passive voice, right? But what happens with they were married, right? Is this a passive voice? Maybe they were married in church yesterday, if you wish, by a priest, right? So this seems to be a passive clause, but they were married. What if I say they were married when I last saw them? What about that? Is that a passive voice? Not really, right? What I'm trying to say is that they were in a certain condition. Married is a participial adjective here, right? Participial adjective, right? Adjective. Now, what I want to share with you now is the same thing I shared with you when we were talking about the present continuous. And I told you, well, the same will happen in the passive voice. So when we have the verb to be plus an ing form or plus a past participle, we need to make sure that what we're looking at is the passive voice, because it may not be so, right? So in order to work on this, we're going to analyze several phrases or sentences in which there is one form of the verb to be, either in the present or in the past, plus a past participle, and well, you will decide if these are passive constructions or not, right? So those I'm going to send them by email, because actually in this format it is a bit difficult. Okay, so I think that will be all, because I haven't covered everything that is said here. Let me know if you have any queries. Okay, so thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.